Mm. Oh, we are live.
Yeah, I
Hello.
believe we are live. Hello to everyone who has joined us so far. Going to give a few more people time to join, and then we're going to leap straight into this demo of all things MCP servers and Claude and Kratix.
That's the plan. Banging mood music.
That should be enough time for everyone to join the live session. I think 3 minutes is more than sufficient. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you with us today for this webinar. Welcome to former attendees and those of you who are joining Syntasso webinar for the very first time. Our session today is No More YAML, Natural Language Deployments with Kratix and Claude. I'm delighted to be joined by Syntasso's very own Shane Dowling. Shane is an engineering manager at Syntasso, and prior to that, he was an engineering manager within a platform team at Gusto. More generally, he's a very keen being when it comes to all things platform engineering, podcasting and blogging about the topic whenever he gets the chance. Today, Shane will be demoing and talking us through a prototype that he's been developing, connecting a Claude chat interface to Kratix during one of our internal hack days. We're going to start with the demo. After the demo, we're going to have a 15-minute Q&A. And whilst I have some questions, I'm even more excited by any questions that you have, so please do share any in the chat. With that, it's over to you, Shane.
All right. Thank you so much, Sapphire, for that absolutely amazing intro. So yeah, as Sapphire said, we're going to talk about Kratix, we're going to talk about MCP servers, and how you too can avoid writing YAML. Slide. So, one sec. There we go. All right. Yeah. So I am Shane, and she is Sapphire, and we both work at Syntasso, and we both work on the open source platform engineering framework Kratix. So before I get into all the kind of MCP goodness, I I need to share a little bit of context, just to kind of get people up to speed to understand what's this MCP server actually done and how it's kind of changed maybe a little bit about how we could run deployments. So firstly, I guess, what is Kratix? Apologies if you already know what it is. We're just going to try share a little bit of the basics quite quickly, just so we can, as I say, give everyone context for the demo. So Kratix is a platform engineering framework, and what I've got up here is kind of a typical interaction with Kratix. So you can see we've got a platform engineer here who will create a promise, and that promise will be something as a service. So in this example, it's a Node web app as a service. So I, as a platform engineer, will say, okay, we need our teams to be able to deploy Node web apps, and we need to be able to accept, certain arguments like name, type, size, etc. And so you'd create that promise, and you'll deploy that then to Kratix, which happens to run on a Kubernetes cluster. And then a software engineer at your company might say, well, I need a Node web app now. And they will request an instance of that promise. We call it a resource request. And that will then deploy your Node web app to Kubernetes or to whatever cloud provider you need. And that's kind of very, very high level, roughly what Kratix does. And so this is kind of like right now how someone might request that resource. It's relatively simple. If you see, this is a screenshot from our docs. We've got like a kind, which is like the type. So if it was a Node web app, it might be called Node-web app. We've got this spec here, which is kind of the arguments that that promise might take. So in this one, it's region. So it might be like, I want my Node web app to deploy in EU West 1, and I need to have 10 gigs of storage or whatever, certain number of CPUs or a certain number of RAM. So that's kind of how you can do it through YAML and using kubectl apply. And then we've also got a backstage interface as well. It's kind of hard to see. Again, it's another screenshot from the docs, but basically you can fill in a form to request these promises as well, or this instance of a promise. So that's kind of very high level how you can request resources through Kratix. All right, so let's talk about what an MCP server is. An MCP server is effectively like a middle layer between AI and various data sources. How it kind of works, well, in terms of when you're developing it, is you would have something like Claude Desktop on your local machine. You'd have an MCP server running on your local machine, and that MCP server typically, well, if you're going to write it with code, essentially you would have some sort of a piece of code that's doing something that interacts with either some code or a data source. Yeah, and that's kind of it. In terms of how we set up this MCP server, we've got Claude Desktop. It's talking to this proof of concept MCP server we've got, and then that MCP server is essentially lines of code that talk to Kubernetes and Kratix, essentially. All right. So why do we look into MCP servers at all? Well, as Sapphire mentioned, this was something we did in a hack day. So we every second Friday do a research Friday, and it's kind of time to explore different topics you're interested in. It might be personal development. It might be something you think could be cool for the product that you want to try out. And every morning, or every Friday morning, every other Friday morning, we typically jump on a call and talk about what we're planning to research in case someone else has done it already or people want to mob around a particular problem. Anyway, this time round, our CEO, Colin, decided to drop in. Now, it's the first and last time he's ever dropped into this call, but he just wanted to drop in and say hello. But he kind of dropped that he'd love to research MCP servers, but his calendar was just too full that day. So I didn't even know what an MCP server was, but I still Googled it briefly and took the bait and said I'd volunteer to look into it. And so what you actually will see today is the majority of that work was done on that Research Friday. So going from not even knowing conceptually what an MCP server is to something that does something kind of cool is pretty quick. Like the turnaround time is really quick. So if you had half an inkling to try out an MCP server or build one yourself, like I would encourage you. It's once the initial faff's done with, it's pretty quick. So yeah, play around with them. They're quite cool. All right. So what is this built with? Well, it's after doing some research on various MCP server implementations. So maybe a little bit of context actually would help here. You can't just like write code and then point an AI at it. You can't even write like an API and point an AI at it. Fast MCPs are a particular protocol, and you do need to use technology that can interact with that. So what drove most of the tech decisions here was fast MCP. This was done a couple of months ago. So at that time anyway, it was the most mature implementation of something that could talk to MCP essentially. And I knew Python, and so it made sense. UV is a Python package manager, but it also at FastMCP lets you kind of quite easily connect your code to Claude desktop. So I have some make targets essentially that allow me to like rebuild the app, shove it into Claude desktop for it to invoke. So these three things were probably the most seamless way to interact with the MCP server. All right. So why did promises kind of work? Well, um, there's a couple of reasons for that. So promises are kind of designed for your business, and so the same API, guardrails, and abstraction layers that can be used by humans and AI. Like if I show you a little diagram here, so like what we've got at the bottom here is someone doing kubectl apply some resource requests, and that's quite easy to do. Um, in the previous slide, you saw that YAML. You write your YAML, and you do a kubectl apply, but I guess it still like requires you to have read up on what is available to you to be able to make this resource request, and also what's expected to be filled in to run this resource request. Um, so it's kind of like, can we reduce the friction on that? Was kind of an interesting question to ask ourselves. The other thing you'll see as well is, so at the bottom, obviously, it's someone requesting it traditionally, how you do it through kubectl or Backstage. But then we've just got someone at the top here saying, give me a big node app. And it's going through Cloud Desktop, it's going through the MCP server. But at the end of it, our whole pipeline is still the same. So what your platform engineers will have designed for your users and the constraints and protections they've put in for your applications will apply both to an AI or to a human. So you can still get your linting, you can still get your compliance checks and your artifacts that'll be assembled, and then the deployment. And because the promises are designed by the platform engineers of your company, it's kind of the promise will expose an interface that's consistent with what your engineers might know culturally. So if you work for a company where your engineers are very much engineers and don't know much about infrastructure, it may be a case of give me a big node web app, and that's absolutely fine as an interface. But say you've got a database product, or you've got a lot of engineers in your company who are experts at databases, and they need fine-grained controls around that. You could write a promise that's very specific about a particular database technology and expose all the arguments those experienced engineers need to make those resource requests. And that same interface you're thinking about for your customers in your organization can be the same interface that AI uses. So it's kind of like quite already tailor built for an interesting interaction with AI, basically. Cool. Yeah, all right. I can crack on with the demo. Let me just share my screen. I'll try to pull up Claude, wherever Claude is. One moment. There we go. All right, go. Give it a moment to load.
We're a patient crowd here.
While that's loading, like before it pops up, I think put yourselves in the mindset of an engineer who's just joined the company and has no familiarity with your technology. Maybe doesn't know what Kubernetes is or AWS or anything else, and they know how to code though, so they want to get their web app up and running. All right, so that's it. You're day one. You don't know what you're doing, and you got to deploy a thing. So, all right, imagine imagine you're that software engineer. The first thing you might ask is like, okay, what can I deploy? So let's ask Claude. Hey, Claude, what can I deploy? What can I deploy? All right, here we are. All right, let's hope this actually works. Again, this was done in a day, so forgive the jankiness of this demo. It's never usually taking this long, obviously.
Such is the nature of the demo, Shane.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, it's actually so. If you take a look at the question I just asked, I didn't mention Kratix or Kubernetes or anything else. I just said, give me what you can deploy, and so it's already kind of inferred a bunch of stuff. So now it's telling me what I'm able to deploy in my new company, and so I can deploy a MongoDB or a Redis. So cool, all right. Then I might want to get a sense of the world. What's so great? What's currently deployed with these promises? All right, so you can see here as well the thinking behind what's happening with Claude. It's working out what endpoint to use, calling that endpoint, getting a response, interpreting it, and then sending this result. So right now we've got 2 MongoDB instances that are running and 6 Redis instances. And it's already offering to deploy additional instances. So it's obviously looked at the endpoints and spotted, I might be able to deploy a thing for you as well. So, all right, let's go with it. Let's deploy Redis. So, okay, I want to deploy a Redis instance. What arguments does it take? Give that a moment. Slow today. While it's thinking, I think one of the things that's quite interesting with working with AI is that it's still quite non-deterministic. So what I typed in yesterday might not necessarily get the same response it gets today. So it's added a nice dynamic element to this demo. All right, but it has actually spotted that it needs the right input schema endpoint, and it's given me the answer back. So what I can deploy with Redis in terms of arguments is a small Redis, which has a single replica, or a large one, which has 3 replicas. So, and it's given me actually what the resource request would look like. But what I'm going to do is be lazy and say, hey, that's great. Can I deploy a small Redis, please? It's just, again, we're not going into great technical depth here in terms of what we're requesting. We're just saying, give me a thing, and it is doing stuff. All right. So it's now created our deployment called Claude Redis with a random UID, as in this the default namespace, and it's small, and it's gotten back its status of created and processing. So it's made that request, pulled some information, and given me that info back. So while that's deploying, maybe I'll deploy a little MongoDB. Okay, so let's deploy MongoDB. What arguments does that accept? All right, give this a moment.
When you're saying this took about a day, Shane?
Yes, this took about a day. I mean, I cleaned it up a little bit in the subsequent days, but I was getting to this point quite quickly. Yeah. All right, so we've gotten our results back for MongoDB, and so it takes in a major version and a version string. So what I can do then is just say, all right, I mean, I already know much about the minor version, so I'm going to say, hey, Claude, looks great. Can I get a version 6 of MongoDB? Question mark. All right.
We just had a question in the chat asking if you could make your screen a little bit bigger, Shane. Is that possible?
Sure.
Probably just the text on the screen.
Oh, yeah, no worries. If I could work out how technology worked, I could probably do that. Give me a sec. Claude, the app is actually not crash, but I can't press anything in the menu bar. So let me see if I can do this a little bit differently. Let me stop sharing for a moment, and then I'll reshare. I'll see if that helps. Actually, what I could do is put it down to a smaller screen. Right. Now, give me one moment. Cool. All right. Is it any better? Hopefully it is.
Yes, it's a bit bigger.
All right. Excellent. Cool. So, all right. So actually, this is interesting. I didn't do this previously, but Claude is trying to be a bit more explicit. So usually I've told it in a test before, give you a version 6 and it just infers a version 6, but actually it's saying, could you specify the exact version string you'd prefer? So I'll say, all right, I'd like version 6 of MongoDB with specifically version 6.0.8. Cool. Let's see what happens.
Oh, glad that screen size is better for you, Alejandro.
Cool. Sorry about that. Okay, so now it's assembled at least what looks like a correct resource request in Kratix. All right. Oh, interesting. Ooh. So it's spotted that there's something wrong with the submit promise request, which is interesting. And so what it's done is validated the promise request first, which is interesting. So just as an aside, one of the things I worked out while developing is like sometimes it's good to give the AI something to validate against before it makes an actual request. But it's kind of funny that this time it decided I'm just going to YOLO it, submit the resource request, and then oh, actually it doesn't work. So let me try validate it. Although it is having an interesting issue. Okay, let me try again. Can you try again? Let's see what happens. It may not work. What is the ghost of demos? Interesting. Huh. All right. Yes, Mongo has not worked. Let's use this as an interesting wild demo learning. Let's see what we can get. Okay. All right. What will I ask? I will ask, okay, can you give me the state of everything that's currently deployed? At least we'll see if Redis is done.
And this should also reflect our MongoDB that wasn't successfully created. Would that be right, Shane?
Potentially, yeah. It depends on where it's failed, actually, to be honest with you. So we have two. All right. Okay. So it actually hasn't pulled back any information. So it may be that my request to Kubernetes is wrong, or it's actually got a malformed resource request. But if it's validated, then that'd be very odd. But it has spotted, it has two existing MongoDBs as you spotted before, and it's got 7 Redis instances, which are all healthy. And it spotted the new one as well. So it's pulled back our Claude Redis one. Cool. I'm not sure why Mongo is not working. I'll debug that one. But it's kind of interesting that it's not working, but Redis is. It makes me think that it's actually possibly got an invalid resource request. Maybe that version string wasn't necessary, the minor version string. But let me at least prove we have deployed Redis. Let me pull down my terminal so that it's not too small for folks. Onto my smaller screen. One moment. Cool. All right. Can folks see a terminal? Yes. All right. Cool. So I'll interact with Kratix now using the Kubernetes API. So I'm using a command called kubectl. I've just got it aliased to K. So if I just do K get promises, you can see. So these are the list of promises. These are the promises the platform engineers probably deployed. And what I can do then is go K get Redis A, and we can see our new Redis instance, which is Claude Redis. I think it was the second one, has been deployed. We can actually take a quick look and say, okay, got MongoDB. And we definitely know the first one hasn't, or the new MongoDB hasn't been deployed because those two ones are already there. So that is them deployed. So I guess your software engineers made their request. They've gotten their thing back, hopefully. And yeah, it will actually deploy to a real thing, which is quite nice. This is, as I say, super hacky and very quick demo. I'm sure there's way cleverer stuff that you can be done with an MCP server. I just kind of wanted to highlight really like how quick and easy it is to get something like this up and running. Like if you've got interesting data sources that you could shove an AI in front of to talk to, give it a go. I think is like limit your creativity really. You can probably string some very interesting data sources together and do something very cool. This, as I say, was just a very quick prototype. And I think that is the end of demo.
Great, thanks a lot, Shane. That's quite a lot to have achieved in a single day. So I think that's still something exciting to showcase. I'm going to go through some of the questions that I have, but as I said before, if you're watching and you've got questions, please don't hold back. Pop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to work through them. One of the first things you said, Shane, was that promises are a particularly good fit for AI interfaces. What what specifically about promises makes them such a good fit, and how does the promise model maybe help the AI stay on the rails?
Yeah, on the rails is the right thing. If you think about like Kubernetes API that we have and the Backstage API we've got, they're quite constrained interfaces and they're very non-deterministic. So it's predictable when you make a resource request, like or make a request to those types of interfaces, like whether you fail or not. They're pretty like harsh no, basically. The thing with AIs are they are, as we've seen, um, unpredictable. And so, let's say, for example, I was like, AI is brilliant. I'm just going to take in AI and I'm going to point it right at a Kubernetes cluster or at my entire AWS cloud, right? That is a pile of context that it's going to try and ingest and make a good decision about. And it's probably going to make the wrong one because it doesn't have all the necessary context it needs. It's a thoughtless interface. Like if you gave someone who barely knew how computers work that same thing, they're also going to be like, I'll do my best, but what else? Um, and so promises are quite thoughtful in that it it's the interface that you expect from the engineers in your organization, and that can be based on like cultural norms, can be based on skill sets, and so that interface you've got is essentially reusable for an AI, consumable by that AI. It's turning something non-deterministic into something more deterministic and sort of tailored to your business as well. So like you've got, as I say, the DB experts who can like, give me all the databases currently live. All right, well, I need this resource. I need to request a database with all these particular parameters. And that can be done through AI. It's not like throwing the AI at this completely huge system and telling it to figure things out. It's leveraging what's already there and leveraging the expertise you've got to kind of get the best outcomes.
Oh, thanks a lot, Shane. Um, One of the things you mentioned there was that the AI can be unpredictable. On occasions where you saw AI calling the wrong endpoint, for instance, how did you trace the why behind behind how that happened, or did you use any logging or introspection tools to help you get to the bottom of what could be going on?
Yeah, I did. So it's not as black box magic as it looks in the demo. So what happens is you'll write some code that is an MCP server, and then you'll get something called an MCP introspector. And for anyone who does any software engineering, this should look quite familiar. It looks like a bunch of API endpoints you can invoke. So you can do all your developing essentially, and then test everything without having an AI involved. Just call those endpoints, see what the response is, and make sure it looks how you expect, essentially. Then you add the AI black box magic onto that and see what happens. Um, some of the things I learned were like function name. Essentially function naming and naming of arguments. You have to be quite particular with. Um, Use the wrong type of word and the AI will not know to connect that word um, with your endpoint. So it might be like I said, give me deployments. Maybe if I said give me releases, it wouldn't have known what that meant and wouldn't have known to invoke that API. So it's kind of it requires a lot of thought to design. I think the right wording to use. It makes again kind of works with an organization because it's like what's the culture? Do we do deploys? Do we do releases? Do we do something else? So you can name it in that regard. But that was one of the things I learned. Like it would invoke things. It does things weird and wonderful where it does it completely different order to what I expect on the demo. Um, but yeah, that was definitely one thing. The other thing I found helpful was try get it to avoid YOLOing. So don't push the prod without validating something. So offering it validation, even though it ignored it this time, was also quite helpful. So again, it's trying to give it the same constraints you might give a junior engineer. It's just try to be thoughtful, name things clearly. Generally, good software engineering principles help here as well. If things are well composed, you got like a thoughtful interface to this thing, then it helps too. And lots of comments basically, and any more text you can give to give it more context is always good.
So a lot of those skills that we consider beneficial in software engineering as a whole are also beneficial when you're trying to work with the tools that you're currently talking about.
Yeah,
You
exactly that.
you mentioned that it was a bit of a faff getting things set up. What were the biggest faff moments, and how did you deal with those?
So when I looked at this, it was a couple of months ago, and so the field of MCP servers may be far more mature now. Um, it was kind of getting everything wired together was seemed to take a lot of magic. I know I said, oh, I use fast MCP and UV and Python, but I was trying lots of other different technology to get it working. And the debugging on the Claude side was also not particularly helpful. It's like, okay, I either click a button and I see all my endpoints, or I click a button and don't see all my endpoints. So that was quite painful. Again, eventually, I got. It took some trial and error to like get everything wired together, but once it did, it worked pretty well. I think some of the developer experience could be better. If I make any code changes, I've got to like basically kill and restart everything. The dev server needs to be killed, restarted, and then the introspector needs to be reconnected. And if I need to then update Claude, I need to recompile the code, basically package the code and send that to the Claude desktop. So I've had a couple of cases where I forgot to do that, and it was running an old instance of the UV server internally, or the fast MCP server internally. So um, some of that might be already ironed out, but definitely it's still early-ish days because I updated all my packages just to see what it was like these days, and still some of that stuff's a bit painful, but
Mm.
it's not too bad. I would say it's okay.
Cool. So still some things that you as a user would like to be ironed out for usability purposes.
Yeah, a little. It's not, again, not the end of the world, but just a little annoying.
Yeah, we've got a question that's come in through the chat from Chuk. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
Chuck.
Are there any constraints or guardrails in terms of roles and permissions? Can I delete an entire Redis instance via Claude and MCP?
So it would depend on what's behind the MCP server, actually. Um, for this MCP server I've created, definitely not. I've not put any delete permissions in. So if you don't expose the endpoint to the MCP server, it can't do it. So unless you've got a very creative AI that can do, I don't know, code injection or something, which may be possible, um, you shouldn't be able to do that. But again, it's the same permissions you give a user, right? Like if you have an organization where you trust your users to create and delete and do whatever, then shoving an AI in front of that's kind of the same. You're kind of using the same permissions your users might get. But yeah, Kratix itself would be the thing protecting your engineers from doing something wild and wonderful. Um, and so, whether it's an AI, whether it's kubectl, whether it's Backstage or AWS CLI or something else, like those constraints will still be in place. Your MCP server should be leveraging that, not just, as I say, pointing it blindly at an AWS console and saying, go for it.
So the AI has the permissions that you have granted, and none more than those.
Exactly. So, logical security checks and guardrails should remain.
Cool. Again, a classic concept in software engineering as a whole. You don't grant access to every single thing that's available. In terms of when you were putting together your own API endpoints for like how you were configuring the prototype that you worked on, did you observe any subtle variations in the APIs that you were using? Did you see that they cause any confusion in the LLM? And were there any naming conventions, for instance, that helped you gain some control there?
Um, It's a good question, and I think naming conventions probably will become more of an interesting topic and a more mature topic in MCP servers in general. I was just fumbling around and seeing what words made sense for the queries I was asking it. And one of the things that is quite helpful is, as a debugger, you can actually just ask your debugger questions. So let's say, for example, I'm like, after this call, I might ask Claude, why did you not validate that request before making the request for the
Mm.
MongoDB? Because like it seems like the last time I asked you did that. And then I'll ask, would you suggest a better word or a term to use? So I was kind of a little bit vibe coding AI led on this. So I haven't come up with any like formal, some formal, what I say, name conventions, but MCP servers themselves have kind of somewhat of a naming convention around tools and resources. So those things you saw being interacted with are called tools. And tools are actually, I'll explain resources first. Resources are simple data sets. So it's like give me a thing, like whatever, any single data point or maybe a list of data points. And then you use tools for like, I want to do an action, or I want to assemble multiple resources and present a report or something. It's kind of like resources are like nouns, tools are like verbs. So they're starting to like work out like what are some of the like terminology we should provide an AI to like make sense of the world. I think, as I say, people will start to figure out. Maybe we may change our language to be more specific about the AI tools. Have decided that deployment is the right term rather than releases. So we just describe our products, the API, in that way. Um, but yeah, it's clear naming essentially and best effort right now. I'm sure there's better resources on this, but I didn't. No natural naming convention really came out beyond what I thought made sense, and what I saw from repeated use made sense for the AI.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, these things might still be emerging. So it might be the case that 6 months from now, someone's put together the AI dictionary for the best ways to interact with Claude, for instance. And I'll be curious to hear whether you go back and ask Claude why it didn't perform that validation this time around when it did before. We've got a follow-up to the question that we received before, which is, can you provide different levels of permissions to the same server? So, for instance, a DevOps persona can delete, but someone with a developer persona can't delete.
That is a good question, and I think it's not answered by MCP servers right now. I would say that what you'd be doing is providing different MCP servers, or finding a way to authenticate through an MCP server. So what might happen is I join Claude, we'll say, and I've got these credentials that don't allow me to delete things because I'm not a DevOps user, and then those credentials are given to the MCP server to then act on your behalf. So then Claude, it may, to be fair, try to delete something if you ask it, but it will be blocked essentially. That's probably the most logical way. So it's like a authentication pass through. I don't know if MCP servers are at that point. So it may be like right now, what I know, I might spin up two MCP servers. Um, yeah, I might spin up two MCP servers and have one for DevOps, one for non-DevOps. But I'm guessing there's going to be something more elegant later on. I would still trust, like right now, talk to systems that are locked down and have like obvious user distinctions, and then have those users talk to an MCP server with the appropriate permission. So typical right now, security is not really huge in MCP right now. It's just,
Mm.
as I say, get something up in a day and muck around, but it'll have to mature, and these sorts of things have to be thought about. But I don't think they're solved right now.
Cool. I think there are many, many questions on the minds of security teams in organizations where people want to bring along an MCP server for some of the exact reasons that you just pointed out. We've got another question from Phil here. Is it easy to set an annotation to a promise so that when an MCP lists all of the promises in that cluster, it has a short description of what it does?
Yes, it should be actually. So essentially, I haven't done it, but it's a really good feature request actually. Um, you can provide, like I say, you can expose that argument in an MCP server endpoint, explain to Claude what that is, and say it's basically describing this thing, and then Claude will go ahead and provide that into your API endpoint. And as long as the Kubernetes request, which is what I write in Python, has that value in it, it should then supply it. And actually, what you're describing will be a very helpful way to start um, providing more context to the MCP server to ask more interesting questions. I'm a new person, and I know our product is selling dog food. Give me all the servers related to, I don't know, printing labels for our dog food company. Um, that starts to, like, again, you're just coloring in more data for an AI to like give you a good understanding of the world quite quickly. So yes, should be easy to do, and actually would be an interesting thing to experiment with.
And I guess also beneficial to the people who are consuming those services on the platform as well. So it might be the case that there are 7 different services with a name something like MongoDB, but you wouldn't necessarily know which one was best for your use case. So a description
Very true.
would be super, super helpful under those circumstances. Um, apart from the great suggestion from Phil there, if you could snap your fingers and add one feature to the prototype that you've developed, what would it be and why?
I think I think about like what it would mean to release this thing into the wild, and it's given me an appreciation for like um, people who are willing to shove AI into their products because it's a terrifying thought. I don't think I would release this thing as a part of Kratix product because it's just too non-deterministic, right? It's just still, even with all the guardrails you might put in, like it's still a bit of a wild and wonderful place. Um, so I think it's not necessarily like features, but more confidence that it can be more deterministic. I think would probably be where I'd be looking to go. I know there's an like for example, AWS are releasing Kiro, and that's got something called spec-driven development. So if you were an engineer, specs might help constrain the wild and wonderful nature of the AI into something that solves your problem. I'd be trying to do the same thing, like is there labeling I can give to Claude to like never call this endpoint unless Y, you know? Um, so getting more confidence to make the system more deterministic as a whole would be probably where my mind would go. Um, what it would mean to release this thing into the wild, I would probably do like you can't even have text input. Like you could just have a button on a UI that said, "Okay, AI, here's all the data from Kubernetes. Go tell me what's going on in the world. Is there any issues? Go try debug that." That might be where I'd start with, just again to try get that determinism down, to get that more predictable. So yeah, it's a very nebulous answer, but more predictability, less wild and wonderful behavior.
No, but that does make me think of one more question, actually.
Hmm.
Presumably, when you're working with this, you did introduce some sort of validation to help rein Claude in. Did you like what sort of middleware or validation layers do you end up using, if
I
any?
mean, it's just well, yeah. In a day, I did very little, but what I did do is like the same validation you would do on a user interface. Essentially, like, are you filling in things I expect? Oh, you don't even know what to fill in? Okay, I'll give you an endpoint that explains to you what you should expect. Those sort of things came about. So it's again, it's leaning on the exact same software engineering principles. I talked about like SQL or code injection attacks. You could probably have those things in there. Like it's still just an interface at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Software engineering principles still apply. So yeah, I didn't need to learn anything new or create a new framework, or I didn't look into, maybe there is one, like an AI sort of guardrail type thing yet, but they probably will come. But at the moment, I'm depending on good old meat and potatoes software engineering skills to hopefully protect systems.
Cool. I think that's a really good point to end on. Thanks a lot, Shane. It sounds like a big takeaway is that you can do quite a lot with a tool like Claude and MCP service. You could do quite a lot in a single day, but it might not be the most rigorous and validated product that you'd want to unleash into the world. Um, and again, a lot of the classic concepts and ideas that we think are really beneficial to software engineering as a whole are very easily are also very, very important when it comes to working with AI and machine learning models as well. So thank you everyone who has joined us today. Um, Thank you to everyone who asked a question. If you've got any more questions, you could probably find Shane on LinkedIn. I'm sure he'll be very, very happy to talk to you about the
Please
advancements
do.
he's making, or to generally chat about platform engineering, as I said before. As previous attendees will know, we've been doing webinars for a little while now, and we've got a lot of content that you can catch up on. So if you want to explore what we've learned from building Kratix, our recommendations for building internal developer platforms, or our thoughts as a whole around the future of platforms, be sure to take a look at the Syntasso LinkedIn feed to find out more and to watch those videos in full. Once again, thank you, Shane, for sharing your experiences and for all of your considered responses to the questions. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, folks.